There's just something different about the tension of a 5-round title fight. The stakes are higher, the fighters are among the very best in the world at their weight, and when you witness a fight as good as these 10, MMA just doesn't get any better. These are the top 10 wildest fights in UFC championship history. If you enjoy the video, don't forget to show your support by hitting the like button and subscribing to our channel. That way you won't miss out on any of our future uploads. Without further ado, let's get into it. Robert Whitaker versus Yoel Romero. Yoel Romero will go down in mixed martial arts history for a number of reasons. His violent finishing ability, his insane genetics and athleticism, but perhaps most of all, the Soldier of God will be remembered as one of the greatest fighters to never win UFC gold. But what's crazy about Romero is that he managed to come close to beating 2 reigning middleweight champs over 3 different fights. One of them was his highly boring narrow decision loss to Israel Adesanya. Another was a fight of the night split decision defeat to Robert Whitaker. And our pick was their absolute war in their rematch. This was a high-octane thriller, folks. A fight that saw Bobby Knuckles crawl through the depths of hell to just about get out of there with a win. Going 10 rounds with Yoel Romero is no easy feat. And man, was Whitaker an absolute beast. Brock Lesnar versus Carwin. Heavyweight fighters play this game with a far greater level of risk attached. If you make a mistake at flyweight and get caught, you might be okay. When it comes to heavyweight though, one shot is likely to ruin your night. Carwin was one of the very greatest punchers to ever lace up 4-ounce gloves. And when he fought Brock Lesnar, it did not take him long to assert his insane power on the contest. He hurt Brock badly and proceeded to put an ungodly beating on him from the top position. But Lesnar would not quit on himself, doing just enough to keep the ref at bay. When Carwin then started to gas, Lesnar proved his champion's heart, turning the tables on his opponent and eventually wearing him down and getting the sub. This performance validated Brock to so many fans. One legendary moment. Jon Jones versus Alexander Gustafsson. The shock of seeing a living legend like Jon Bones Jones struggling against an unheralded contender like Alexander Gustafsson definitely elevated this fight to another level entirely. But even if you strip back the context, Jones versus Gustafsson was an absolutely amazing 205-pound title collision. Gustafsson outperformed all expectations by getting in there and giving Jones the fight of his life. But what was truly special about this one was how Gus brought the dog out in Jon in a way that we had never seen before. He pushed the seemingly unbeatable champion from the opening bell, making him look undeniably human in there. It was a wild 20 minutes of constant momentum changes, and though Gustafsson came up short, he was well and truly branded as a star in the eyes of the world of MMA. Weili Zhang versus Joanna Jędrzejczyk, greatest fight in women's MMA history, and a deserving member of our top 10. Matt Hughes versus Frank Trigg. You know a fight is good when Dana White calls a one-round affair as you will ever see in this sport. If you're enjoying this video so far and would like more of this content, please hit the subscribe button as it would drastically help us out. Now, let's get back to the action. Anderson Silva versus Chael Sonnen. How could we make a list of insane UFC title fights and not put this wild middleweight matchup in the mix? Chael Sonnen should not have been a match for the great Anderson Silva. And yet, on fight night, all of that pre-fight trash talk was validated in the most shocking way possible. Sonnen put a pace on Silva that the champ was just not ready for. This was a matchup of powerful wrestling against flashy striking. And coming into the final minutes of this 5-round contest, it looked as though Chael was about to pull off the upset of the century. But in moments like this, true champions rise to the occasion. And with the fight in its dying moments, Silva, from bottom, latched onto a triangle choke, tapping the American Gangster for one of the most unlikely fight-ending sequences we have ever seen. Frankie Edgar versus Maynard. You had to know this one was coming. Frankie Edgar is a natural bantamweight who spent years at featherweight and won UFC gold at lightweight. And his display in that rematch with Maynard was out of this world. If ever there was a 10-7 round in mixed martial arts, this was it. Maynard pummeled Frankie to the point of getting the finish constantly in this round, and nearly scored the TKO too many times to count. Somehow, though, Edgar would not be beaten, and the way he climbed back into this fight from the brink of defeat to actually win most of the remaining rounds? Stunning. Robbie Lawler versus Carlos Condit. It was said that Robbie Lawler probably took years off of his career through the effort expelled by him in his previous title defense against Rory McDonald. And yet, when the time came for him to take on Carlos Condit, he somehow delivered another classic. Now, this one was a controversial one, make no mistake. Lawler was getting totally outvolumed by Condit for the majority of this fight. And like everyone watching at home, going into round 5, we were certain that only a finish would do. To say that Lawler brought some insane intensity in this final round would be putting it lightly. In fact, the final 2 minutes are a slice of MMA awesomeness that you could put up against anything. Lawler, as it turned out, was actually ahead on the scorecards, only doubled down on his lead with that huge 5th round. But this fight was all kinds of amazing. Glover Teixeira versus Yuri Pratka. In the runner-up spot, we have the wildest UFC title fight of its era. Now, look, we're not going to sit here and tell you that Glover Teixeira's title defense against Yuri Pratka was an amazing display of fight IQ by either man, because it wasn't. But in terms of pure grit, pure heart, and one of the most insane 5th rounds of all time, it doesn't get any better than this. Yuri should have lost this fight, but after more momentum switches than you sometimes see in an entire fight card, Yuri somehow reversed position on Glover and scored the sub on the most successful submission artist in 205-pound history. How about that for a way to win UFC gold? Robbie Lawler versus Rory McDonald. This one is the gold standard for high-level, high-tension title fights. We all knew that Robbie Lawler was an absolute savage in the cage, but he was old, weathered, and expected to be brushed aside by the young Canadian Rory McDonald. Lawler was tough, experienced, and never likely to give up. But at first, Rory looked like the technically sharper man, using his new age skill set to pull ahead of Robbie early on. But as this bout began to heat up, man, did Lawler bring his best. This was an insane effort of attrition from both men. A high-octane thriller with the greatest mid-round stare-down moment in the sport's history. Just as Lawler was looking doomed to lose his title on the cards, he found a way to finish Rory in round 5. Not by KOing, but by smashing his nose in so badly that his opponent couldn't take it anymore. A truly brutal affair. If you enjoyed these battles as much as we like compiling them, please subscribe and hit that like button. Trust us, you'll want to know about all the crazy stuff that's going to happen next.